She took a secret to her grave. Until her family opened the shed was still locked. Even after the coffin had been lowered into the ground, even after the guests left and the house fell into that strange, heavy silence that follows death, the shed behind the roses stood there, unchanged. A padlock eaten by rust, a door swollen by years of rain, and the same chill in the air that used to make Anna's grandmother say, "Don't go near it, sweetheart." It was just after dawn when Anna found herself standing there, her boots sinking into the damp soil, staring at that old wooden door like it was staring back. "They buried her yesterday," she whispered, voice trembling. "So why does it still feel like she's watching?" Hook, emotional and eerie tone established. If stories like this make you think about the secrets families hide, subscribe. Because what Anna was about to uncover inside that shed would change everything she thought she knew about love, fear, and the things people take to their graves. Call to action, immediate engagement. The day after the funeral, the Grant family gathered in Evelyn's small Oregon house to start sorting through her belongings. The old living room smelled like dust, lavender, and lemon polish. Every surface was filled with the kind of objects that say a long life was lived here. Porcelain figurines, fading photographs, yellowed letters tied with ribbon. Michael, Evelyn's only son, sat at the kitchen table, elbows on his knees, hands hanging between them. His grief had no sound, just a kind of inward collapse. Anna, 26, quiet, sharp-eyed, walked from room to room like she was trying to see her grandmother for the first time, not as the sweet old lady who baked cinnamon rolls every Sunday, but as a woman who had lived decades of silence. Outside, the shed loomed behind the apple tree, half swallowed by ivy. It looked smaller than she remembered, almost fragile, but something about it made her stomach tighten. "You remember what she used to say?" Michael asked, noticing her through the window. Anna nodded. "No one goes in the shed." He gave a dry laugh that wasn't really a laugh. "Not even me. I asked once when I was a kid. She locked it and told me to mind my own business." He paused. "And I did, for 60 years. They stood in silence for a moment. Wind scraped through the garden. The shed's door rattled faintly, like it was breathing. That night, after everyone left, Anna stayed. The house felt emptier than it had in years. She found herself wandering through the kitchen, past the hallway lined with framed family photos, to Evelyn's bedroom. The air still carried her scent, soap and rose water. On the dresser sat an old jewelry box, the kind with a ballerina that twirls when you open it. Anna turned the tiny brass key and let the lid rise. The melody creaked to life, thin and off tune. Inside, among earrings and buttons, something glinted, a smaller, unfamiliar key, darkened by age. Her pulse quickened. It didn't fit the house keys on the rack. It was older, heavier, and somehow she already knew what it opened. On the next morning, the sky was pale and low, the kind that seems to press down on your shoulders. Anna stepped outside, the key cold in her hand. The shed waited, the padlock dull and motionless. She crouched down, turning the key between her fingers, afraid of how easily it might fit. "Grandma," she whispered, "what were you hiding?" She hesitated, heart pounding, every part of her knowing she shouldn't, because everyone in the family had learned that lesson the hard way. There were boundaries you didn't cross with Evelyn Grant. She had always been kind, yes, but also firm in quiet, unshakable ways. No one entered her shed, No one asked why, and no one ever heard her talk about the summer of 1964. Anna turned the key in her hand once more. It was a perfect match for the lock. And inside the house, a photo of Evelyn smiled from the mantel, the same smile she wore every Christmas, every birthday, every time she wanted to steer the conversation away from the past. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing through the uncut grass, and somewhere behind the closed shed door, something shifted, soft, almost like paper sliding against wood. Anna froze. It wasn't the sound of wind. She took a step back, breath catching. "Grandma?" she whispered, even though she knew there would be no answer. And still, something about that silence, deep and unnatural, made her realize this was not over. Death had taken her grandmother, but the truth was still alive, waiting in the dark behind that door. The key was heavier than it looked. When Anna held it in her palm, it pressed into her skin like something alive, cold, sharp, deliberate. She kept turning it over, as if the brass itself might whisper answers. Her father, Michael, found her standing at the back door, staring out toward the shed through the drizzle. "You're not thinking about opening it, are you?" he asked. Anna didn't answer. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Your grandmother was complicated, but whatever's in there, I just want to know why she kept it locked," Anna interrupted softly. "All these years, Dad, nobody ever asked?" He looked away, as if the question itself hurt. "You didn't grow up with her the way I did. When she said don't, you didn't ask why. You just didn't." After lunch, they started sorting through the attic. Dust floated through the slanted sunlight like old ghosts. Boxes stacked against the walls, some labeled Christmas, taxes, others marked simply keep. Anna found one labeled garden, though when she opened it, there wasn't a single gardening tool inside, just stacks of envelopes, faded ribbons, and old children's books. On the inside flap of one book, The Little Engine That Could, there was a name, written in a child's messy handwriting. Danny. Anna frowned. "Who's Danny?" Michael leaned over, squinting. "I don't know. We didn't have any relative by that name." He paused. "She never mentioned a Danny." There was something strange about the way he said it, almost too quickly, as if the name stirred something buried deep. That evening, the rain thickened, drumming on the roof until it drowned out every other sound. Anna couldn't stop thinking about that book, about the name, about the way Evelyn's voice had always changed when she mentioned children. She remembered once as a kid asking her grandmother why she never talked about her early years. Evelyn had smiled, distant. "Some stories are best kept quiet, sweetheart. They lose their goodness when you tell them out loud." Now, that line felt different, like a warning. And by the next morning, curiosity had hardened into something stronger. Anna waited until her father went into town for paperwork. The house was empty, the world outside still wrapped in fog. She took the key from her jacket pocket and walked toward the shed. The closer she got, the heavier the air seemed, the smell of wet wood, soil, and time. She brushed the cobwebs from the door, studied the old padlock, and slid the key in. It fit perfectly. For a moment she couldn't breathe. Every part of her expected resistance, but the lock turned with a soft metallic click, like it had been waiting. She hesitated, one step back, one deep breath. Then she pulled the door open. And the first thing she noticed was the smell, not of rot, but of dust and something faintly sweet, like faded perfume. The air was thick and unmoving. Light slipped in through a crack in the roof, slicing the room into pale golden shadow. Against the far wall stood a small wooden table, cluttered with jars of dried flowers, brushes, and an old oil lamp. On the shelves, boxes neatly labeled in Evelyn's handwriting, ribbons, buttons, "Do not touch." Anna's throat tightened. She reached out, ran her hand along the edge of the table, and saw something that made her freeze. A stack of children's drawings, hundreds of them, faded paper, crayon, watercolor. She picked one up, a simple picture of a boy standing under a tree. Dark hair, dark eyes. Behind him, a red roof that looked eerily like the shed itself. Another drawing. The same boy. A different season. Another. The boy again, holding what looked like a toy plane. Page after page. Year after year. The same face. The same child. Anna's breath came faster. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them. Some were signed in shaky, childish letters. Danny. She whispered the name like it might summon an answer. Danny. A noise behind her made her jump, the creak of the garden gate. She turned, heart hammering, but it was only Michael. "What are you doing?" he shouted over the rain. Anna's voice was a whisper. "You need to see this." He stepped inside, his shoes crunching on the floorboards. His eyes swept the room, confusion turning into disbelief. "Are these drawings?" "Hundreds. Look." He picked one up, held it to the light. The boy's face stared back, familiar somehow, but neither of them could place it. Michael swallowed. "This doesn't make sense. Mom never talked about..." He stopped. His eyes drifted toward a small wooden frame on the shelf, half buried under dust. He lifted it, wiped the glass. Inside the frame, a black and white photograph. A young Evelyn, maybe in her 30s, standing by the same shed, and beside her, a little boy. The same dark eyes, the same solemn face. Michael's voice cracked. "Oh my God." Anna stepped closer. "Who is he?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at the photo, the color draining from his face, until finally he whispered, I think I remember that summer." Michael stood frozen in the middle of the shed, the photograph trembling slightly in his hand, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tightening as though he were holding back a flood of words. Anna watched him carefully. "What summer, Dad?" she asked, her voice low, cautious. He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at that photograph, the one with Evelyn's faint smile, her arm protectively around the little boy. Then he whispered, 1964, the year she stopped talking to anyone on this street. Outside, the rain had quieted to a mist. Inside, the air was still heavy, almost sacred. Anna looked around again, really seeing the shed for what it was, not a storage place, but a time capsule. Everything was arranged too deliberately, boxes aligned perfectly, surfaces dusted even beneath the cobwebs. It didn't feel abandoned, it felt kept. She picked up one of the jars on the shelf. Inside were dried wildflowers tied with twine, their colors long gone. A handwritten label, Danny's Flowers, June 1970. The date made her chest tighten. "Dad," she said softly, turning the jar toward him. Michael set down the photo frame and rubbed his temples. "I don't understand. I was 10 that year. I don't remember anyone named Danny." "Maybe he wasn't from here," Anna said. He shook his head slowly. "Everyone in this town knew everyone back then." Anna's gaze drifted back to the drawings scattered across the floor. Each one carried a story told in color and silence. A boy flying a kite, feeding birds, building something with wood and nails. All simple, innocent moments drawn with the hand of a child who had known both care and confinement. And in every picture, there was always the same house, the same garden, the same shed. See, they spent the rest of the afternoon sorting through the boxes, each discovery adding another layer of unease. A tin box filled with crayons worn down to stubs, a faded sweater too small for any of the grandchildren, and a notebook no bigger than a hand filled with shaky handwriting. Anna opened it gently. The first page read, "Today I helped Grandma plant roses." She said roses, remember. She looked up sharply. He called her Grandma. Michael swallowed hard. "That doesn't mean, it means," she cut in, "that whoever he was, she treated him like family." But the daylight dimmed as they worked, the single window smearing with fog. The shed's quiet seemed a hum, as if it had grown used to being left alone and resented their presence. Anna knelt to pick up another drawing that had slid under a crate. As she tugged it free, her fingers brushed against the wood and felt a hollow sound underneath. She froze, knocked again. The same hollow thud. "Dad," she whispered, "listen." Michael crouched beside her. Together they moved the crate aside, revealing a section of floor slightly misaligned with the rest. The boards were newer, smoother. "Someone replaced these," Anna said. Her father fetched a screwdriver from the shelf. "Step back." He wedged it between the boards, prying gently until one came loose with a groan of old nails. Beneath it, darkness. Anna held her breath as Michael lifted another plank and another until they'd uncovered a small cavity. Inside lay a metal lunchbox, tarnished and covered in dust. He reached for it slowly, as if afraid it might vanish at his touch. The lid creaked open. Inside were only three things: a silver bracelet with tiny engraved letters, DW, a folded note, edges yellowed and brittle, and a small carved wooden bird, its paint flaking away. Michael opened the note carefully. The handwriting was faint but legible. "If you ever find this, please forgive me. I did what I had to. He was loved. I promise you that." Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The air seemed to pulse with a weight that wasn't entirely grief. Finally, Anna whispered, "She wrote this." Michael nodded, voice hoarse. "Yeah." They sat there on the cold floor, surrounded by the echoes of Evelyn's secret, the drawings, the toys, the scent of dust and dried flowers wrapping around them like the ghost of her touch. "She always said the shed was where she kept her memories," Anna murmured. "Now I think I know what she meant." Michael leaned against the wall, staring at the crack of fading daylight at the door's edge. "Your grandmother wasn't a liar, Anna," he said finally, "but she was hiding something. Maybe something she thought she could protect us from." He glanced back at the open floorboards, at the empty space beneath. But what if it was something bigger than her? Anna turned to look at him, her voice barely a whisper. "Then it's already bigger than us." Outside, the last light of day slid across the field, and the shed's door creaked as the wind shifted. For a moment, it almost sounded like a sigh, and beneath the floor where the lunchbox had been, the darkness waited, deeper than they knew, as if the earth itself had more to tell. By the next morning, the house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a waiting room for ghosts. Michael hadn't said a word since they'd closed the shed door. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing. Anna, restless, moved through the living room, clutching one of the drawings in her hands, the boy beneath the tree. His eyes followed her everywhere she went. She couldn't stop thinking about that note in the lunchbox. He was loved. Loved by whom? Loved how? And what did her grandmother mean by, "I did what I had to"? Every question led to another. Every silence in the house now felt deliberate. So by mid-afternoon, she returned to the shed alone. The air inside still held that faint sweetness, the scent of something once alive. Dust motes spun lazily in the golden light cutting through the roof crack. The drawings were where they had left them, spread across the table, the floor, stacked against the wall in curling piles. She sat cross-legged on the wooden floor and began sorting them chronologically, guided by the shaky dates in the corners. 1964, 1965, 1966. The boy never changed, same height, same face, same serious eyes, but Evelyn's handwriting did. At the bottom of some, in neat cursive, she'd written little captions. Danny's first rose, Danny in the birdhouse, Danny's smile, finally. Anna's heart clenched. The words finally carried a story of their own. She laid the drawings in order, one after another, until they formed a kind of timeline. The early ones were bright, filled with blues and greens, but as the years went on, the colors dulled. More browns, more gray skies, more shadows behind the boy, and then, suddenly 1973, the last drawing. It showed the same boy standing in front of the shed, holding what looked like a small candle. Behind him, the faint outline of smoke. The paper had a charred corner. Anna's pulse quickened. She ran her finger along the burnt edge. It crumbled at her touch. The shed door creaked open behind her. Michael's voice, quiet, strained. "I knew you'd be here." He stepped in, the floor groaning beneath his weight. His eyes darted around the drawings, spread like fallen leaves. "Dad," Anna said, "look at this. The last one. It's dated 1973, the same year the shed caught fire." He froze. "What?" "She drew this before the fire, I think. Look, the smoke, the candle. Maybe it's not just a drawing. Maybe she knew it was going to happen." Michael knelt beside her, his hand trembling as he touched the page. "I remember that fire," he whispered. "I was away at college. Mom called me crying, said lightning hit the roof. But it never made sense. The shed didn't burn down completely, just the inside." He stared at the drawing for a long time, eyes glistening. "She rebuilt it after that. Said it was for storage. We believed her." Anna met his gaze. What if the fire wasn't an accident? Michael stood slowly, pacing the small room. "You're saying she, set it on fire herself?" "I don't know," Anna said. "Maybe she was hiding something down here, something she couldn't let anyone see." He turned toward the floorboards where they'd found the lunchbox. His jaw tightened. "You think there's more under there?" "I think," Anna said, her voice steady now. "There has to be." They spent hours examining every inch of the shed, under the table, behind the shelves, every board, every nail. The structure was old, but certain parts were different. Newer wood, clean hammer marks, sections repaired with care. Finally, near the back wall, Anna noticed something odd, a seam in the floor, barely visible beneath the rug. She pulled it back, revealing a faint outline, like a hatch. Michael knelt and ran his hand along the edge. "There's a handle, he murmured, "covered in paint." He gripped it and tugged. It didn't move. Years of rust and dust had sealed it shut. He tried again, harder. The wood groaned but didn't give. "Wait," Anna said, grabbing a crowbar from the corner. Together they pried at the edges, the metal shrieking against the boards until, with a heavy crack, the hatch lifted. A rush of cold, stale air rose from below, air that hadn't moved in decades. They both froze. The darkness below seemed endless. Michael fetched a flashlight from the shelf. The beam cut through the black like a knife. What it revealed made both of them go still. Wooden steps, narrow, uneven, descending into what looked like a cellar. Anna's voice was barely audible. She built this. Michael swallowed hard. No one builds something like this for storage. He shone the light downward again. The beam caught something metallic, a bed frame, a small table, a tin cup, and scrawled across the wall in faded chalk, just visible through the dust, Danny's room. Anna's breath hitched. Her heart pounded so hard it echoed in her ears. Michael turned to her, eyes wide, voice trembling. She kept him here. The realization hung between them, heavy and unbearable. All those years of secrecy. All those nights when Evelyn locked the shed and said, "Don't go near it, sweetheart." All those stories about keeping memories safe. They weren't metaphors. They were literal. Outside, the clouds thickened again, the wind rising through the trees like the sound of something waking up. The shed's door rattled in its hinges. Anna stared into the hole, into the past her grandmother had buried beneath their feet. She whispered, almost to herself, "What did you do, Grandma?" They didn't sleep that night. The wind moaned through the trees, and the shed, that ordinary weathered thing, now loomed like a wound in the backyard. Michael sat by the window, staring out at it, as if waiting for his mother's silhouette to appear. Anna, unable to rest, went through Evelyn's desk drawers, searching for anything that could make sense of what they'd found. At the bottom of the last drawer, beneath old letters and receipts, she found a shoebox sealed with masking tape. On the lid, in faded marker, one word: clippings. Her hands shook as she peeled away the brittle tape. Inside, folded and stacked in careful order, were dozens of newspaper articles, each yellowed with time. The earliest dated July 1964. The headline on the first one read, "Local boy, age 6, missing from Riverside neighborhood." The boy's name was Daniel Wells, last seen playing outside his home near Riverview Drive. Anna felt her throat tighten as she looked at the small, grainy photograph printed beside the article. A dark-haired boy with solemn eyes, the same eyes from the drawings. She spread the articles across the table, one after another. Each told the same story, but with growing desperation. Massive search underway for missing child. Police question neighbors in ongoing case. Reward raised to $5,000 for information on Daniel Wells. The last one, from December 1964, read simply, "Hope fades for missing boy." There were also handwritten notes in Evelyn's tight, slanted script in the margins. His father, Chitemper, everyone knew. No follow-up after July 20th. They stopped looking too soon. Michael stood behind her now, silent. He looked down at the clippings, his face pale. "She kept this," he said softly, "all this time." Anna nodded, because she knew something. They sat for a long moment, surrounded by the yellowed paper ghosts of a town's forgotten tragedy. Then Michael spoke. "I remember that name," he said. "Wells. His dad worked at the mill. Big man, always angry. I used to see him yell at people outside the store." He rubbed his temples. "Mom knew them. She used to babysit for some of the neighborhood kids back then. But one summer she just stopped. Said she was tired, wanted time to herself. I thought she was just getting older. Anna turned to him slowly. What if that was the summer she found him? Outside, the night thickened, the sky pressing down like wet cloth. The shed stood dark, unmoving, but now, every time Anna looked at it, she couldn't help but imagine a child's voice beneath it, soft and patient, asking to come out. When morning came, they went back inside. The cellar beneath the shed was colder than before, the air dense and still. Michael held the flashlight as Anna descended first, her hand sliding along the wall. The beam swept across the tiny space, a small bed, a shelf with books eaten by mold, a cup, a candle stub hardened to the table, and on the far wall, more drawings, hundreds of them, taped and tacked in uneven rows, overlapping like leaves. The boy again, the shed, the garden, Evelyn. Some were drawn in pencil, others in charcoal. In one, Evelyn sat reading to the boy under the apple tree. In another, the boy smiled, holding a small bird at his hands. Anna reached out and touched one. The paper disintegrated slightly under her fingertips. This was his room, she whispered. Michael swallowed hard. She hit him here. He turned slowly, sweeping the flashlight toward a corner, and froze. There was another box, wooden, sealed with nails, covered in dust. On top, a small tag, "Do not open." Anna's heart pounded. Michael hesitated, then pried the lid loose with a crowbar. Inside lay more newspaper clippings, later ones this time, from 1973. The first headline, "Abandoned House Fire Claims Life of Unknown Boy." The second, "Officials Investigate Cause of Mysterious Fire on Maple Street." The third, smaller, buried among the classifieds, "Woman Found Injured in Garden Shed, Refuses to Speak." Michael read it twice before realizing what it meant. She was that woman, he said. Mom. Anna covered her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. She tried to save him. He turned over the last clipping. On the back, in Evelyn's handwriting, he was asleep. I didn't see the candle fall. I couldn't get to him. The cellar seemed to shrink around them, the weight of the years pressing in from every wall. Michael lowered himself to the ground, face buried in his hands. "All those years," he said, voice breaking. "She carried this alone." Anna crouched beside him, the flashlight trembling in her grip. She couldn't tell anyone. They would have called her a criminal, kidnapping, harboring. She didn't care, he whispered. She did it anyway. They sat in silence. The beam of light flickered against the walls, illuminating the last drawing on the far side of the cellar. The boy and Evelyn together, holding hands. Beneath it, in faded chalk, one final word. Safe. When they climbed out of the cellar, dawn was breaking. The garden glistened with dew, and the shed door hung open, creaking softly in the breeze. Michael turned back once, eyes red, voice low. She wasn't hiding a crime, he said. She was hiding mercy. Anna looked toward the rising sun, her grandmother's house glowing faintly in the light. For the first time, she understood that the silence Evelyn had carried all her life wasn't shame, it was grief. And grief sometimes builds walls you can't open until the person who built them is gone. That morning the house was quiet, but not peaceful. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards, every drip from the faucet felt like a whisper from the past. Anna moved through the rooms like she was trespassing in her own bloodline. Every corner of her grandmother's home now seemed to hide a question. Michael sat on the edge of the couch, the shoebox of clippings open before him. He was tracing one of the headlines with his finger over and over, as if touching the words could change them. He was asleep. I didn't see the candle fall. "Dad," Anna said quietly, "we have to go back down there." He looked up, his eyes dull with exhaustion. "Why?" "Because that note in the lunchbox said he was loved." She hesitated. "There's more down there. I can feel it." Michael's expression hardened, torn between fear and something else, something like guilt. He rubbed his forehead, exhaled, and finally nodded. "Then we do this properly. No secrets left." The shed smelled of rain-soaked earth and dust when they entered again. Sunlight fell through the small crack in the roof, slicing across the floor like a blade. Michael pulled the hatch open, the wood groaning in protest. When they descended into the cellar this time, Anna brought gloves and a small lantern. The light spread across the cramped space, touching the bed, the shelves, the wall of drawings that had once been a child's only window to the outside world. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence was its own language. Then Anna said, "She built this herself. Every nail, every beam." Michael nodded slowly. "She must have been terrified." "Terrified of who?" He looked up, meeting her eyes. "His father. The man from the articles. He was violent, everyone knew. Maybe she thought if she told anyone, he'd come for her too." Anna crouched near the far wall, running her hand along the boards. One plank gave slightly under pressure. She knocked. A hollow sound answered. "Dad," she said, "help me lift this." They pried the board loose. Beneath it was another small cavity, this one lined with oilcloth. Inside lay a metal tin, rusted and sealed with tape. Michael peeled it back carefully. Inside were small things, objects so personal they almost felt sacred. A boy's marble chipped at one edge, a faded photograph of Evelyn holding a child's hand, and a letter, folded, creased, written in the same careful hand that had labeled every jar and every box. Anna read it aloud, voice shaking. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone. I never meant to lie. I never meant to steal. I only wanted to save what the world had already thrown away." His name was Daniel. He was 6 when I found him behind the church, hiding, shaking, burned on his arm. I asked him where he lived. He said nowhere. I brought him home. I thought it would be for one night. It became a lifetime. Michael sat down heavily on the floor, staring at the letter as Anna continued. "They said I should turn him in, but I knew what they'd do. They'd give him back to the man who made him bleed. I couldn't let that happen. I told everyone I needed time alone. I told them I was ill. Then I built this place." Every day he would draw. He said drawing helped him breathe. Anna's voice broke slightly, but she kept reading. "When the fire came, I was in the house. I heard the crackle, ran out barefoot. I remember the smoke. I remember his voice, and then I remember nothing. God forgive me. He was loved." Anna folded the letter back with trembling hands. Michael pressed his palms together, whispering something that sounded like a prayer. All those years of silence, of her grandmother's strange calm, of the closed shed. Now it all made sense. It wasn't madness. It was mourning. "Dad," Anna said softly. She wasn't hiding shame. She was protecting him, even after he was gone. Michael's eyes were wet, and she never told me, not once. "She couldn't," Anna said. "You were just a kid. She was probably afraid someone would find out." He nodded slowly, staring into the dark corner of the cellar. "And after that day, she carried it alone." They searched the rest of the floor, uncovering one final thing, a wooden plaque carved with uneven letters. The surface was smooth from touch, the letters painted once in blue, Danny's Garden. Anna held it in her lap, her fingers tracing the grooves. She must have hung this outside, before the fire. Michael looked at it for a long time. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "We should hang it again." When they climbed out of the cellar, the morning had turned to afternoon. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers. The shed stood open, the wind stirring the drawings inside like breath returning to the room. Anna turned to her father. She left everything down there for someone to find. Maybe not the police, maybe not the town, just us. Michael's voice cracked as he answered, "Then we'll make it right." They closed the hatch gently and stood for a moment in the sunlight, letting the air wash over them. The garden seemed to shimmer faintly, the roses bending toward the shed as if bowing to something unseen. For the first time since Evelyn's death, the place didn't feel haunted. It felt alive. But somewhere deep below, beneath the floorboards and the secrets and the years of silence, the truth still waited, unfinished. The next day the air was clear and sharp, washed clean by a night of rain. But inside the shed, the air still felt heavy, like the walls remembered every breath that had ever been taken there. Anna stood at the top of the cellar steps, holding the lantern in one hand. She'd spent half the night thinking about the letter. The words looped through her mind like an echo she couldn't silence. "I thought it would be for one night. It became a lifetime." Michael followed her down slowly, careful not to step on the loose boards. The lantern's glow trembled against the earthen walls. This time, they weren't there to uncover secrets, but to understand them. At the bottom, Anna turned the light toward the far wall. The drawings shimmered faintly under the glow, dozens of them layered on top of each other, colors fading but not gone. She reached out and touched one, a simple picture of Evelyn and the boy sitting at a small table, cups in their hands. In the corner, Danny had drawn a tiny red heart. "I think he loved her," Anna said softly. Michael nodded. She was the only person who ever protected him. They moved along the wall, reading the captions Evelyn had written in pencil. "Danny's first snow. He laughed today. He said he dreamed of flying." The words grew shakier toward the end until they were almost illegible. "She knew he was sick," Michael murmured. Anna turned. "What?" He pointed at a small shelf in the corner. On it sat old medicine bottles, their labels faded, a cracked thermometer, a folded blanket still neatly arranged. "She tried to take care of him down here," he said, "without anyone knowing. But she couldn't get real medicine without raising suspicion." Anna's eyes stung. She must have been terrified and alone. The lantern light flickered, throwing shadows across the wall. That's when Anna noticed something strange, a section of the stone wall that didn't quite match. The surface was smoother, newer, and marked by faint scratches. "Dad, look," she whispered. Michael knelt, brushing his hand across the stones. The mortar felt soft, uneven. "This part's been rebuilt," he said. "See here? It's patched." Anna stepped closer, heart hammering. Why would she rebuild the wall? "Maybe to seal something," he said quietly. They exchanged a long, uneasy look. Then Michael took the small crowbar and wedged it between two stones. The scrape echoed through the cellar. With a grunt, he pried one loose, then another. A soft cascade of dust and pebbles fell at their feet. Behind the stones lay a hollow space. Anna lifted the lantern. The light cut through the gap, revealing a wooden box no larger than a shoebox wrapped in cloth. Michael's breath caught. She hid something else. They pulled it free carefully, setting it on the floor. The cloth came away with a sigh of dust. Inside the box lay a small notebook bound with string. Its cover was cracked, its pages yellowed with age. Anna opened it and the scent of old paper filled the air. The handwriting inside was unmistakably Evelyn's. March 12th, 1965. He still wakes up at night. He calls for his mother, though I don't think she's alive. I tell him the angels are watching. He says he doesn't like angels. They don't come when he cries. August 5th, 1967. He asked if we could go outside. I told him not yet. He said he doesn't mind the dark anymore. That scared me. February 2nd, 1970. The fever came back. He said he dreamed of fire. I told him it was just a dream. May 14th, 1973. He wanted to light a candle for his mother. I told him no. I turned my back for one moment. Only one. Anna's throat tightened so much she could barely speak. Michael pressed his fist against his mouth, eyes shut. She was writing it like a confession, Anna whispered, like she knew one day someone would find this. Michael nodded, voice breaking. She wanted us to understand. He looked around the tiny room, at the bed, the drawings, the small table still covered in dust. This was his whole world, he said. 4 walls, a bed, and her. And love, Anna added. They sat in silence, the lantern casting a warm circle around them. Michael reached for the wall where Danny had written his name in chalk. He traced it gently, the letter still faintly visible after 50 years. I used to think Mom was strange, he said, always in the garden, always quiet, never going on trips, but now, he laughed softly, a broken sound. She couldn't leave. She was taking care of him. Anna looked up at him. You think anyone ever suspected? He shook his head. People see what they want to see. A widow, a quiet woman, no trouble to anyone. That's how towns survive, by not asking questions. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of wind filtered faintly from above, the smell of damp earth settling around them. Then Anna said, "We have to tell someone, the police maybe." Michael hesitated. And tell them what? That Mom kept a child hidden for nearly 10 years and buried the truth after he died? She didn't bury him, Anna said firmly. She buried the pain. That's not a crime. He looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. Maybe not, but it's still our story now, and we have to decide how to tell it. Anna turned toward the hatch, her voice quiet but certain. We'll tell it the way she couldn't, without shame. When they climbed out of the cellar, the late afternoon light had turned golden. The shed was warm, the dust glowing in the sunbeams. Michael closed the hatch carefully, his hand lingering on the wood. She kept him safe, he said softly, until the end. Anna looked round the garden, the roses her grandmother had tended, the trees swaying gently in the wind. She kept his memory safe too, she said. Now it's our turn. The night settled over the house like a heavy blanket, pressing softly but firmly against the windows. Anna couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the cellar again, the bed, the drawings, the chalk writing on the wall. She could almost hear the quiet scrape of a pencil, the sound of a child breathing in the dark. Around 2 a.m., she gave up trying to rest. She wrapped a sweater around her shoulders and went back to the shed. The moonlight poured through the roof crack, pale and thin, and the smell of earth and roses mixed with something faintly metallic, the scent of old nails and forgotten years. She climbed down into the cellar one last time. Something inside her whispered that there was still one more thing waiting to be found. The lantern's light trembled against the walls. She knelt beside the bed, tracing her fingers along the frame. The wood was smooth in places, as though someone had held it for comfort again and again. When she reached underneath, her hand brushed something dry and brittle, an envelope. It was wedged between the slats, sealed with red wax that had long since cracked. Her grandmother's handwriting curved across the front, for the one who loves enough to look. Anna's breath caught. She broke the seal with shaking fingers. Inside was a letter, yellowed but perfectly preserved. The ink had faded in places, but the words were still clear. She began to read aloud softly, her voice trembling in the darkness. If you have found this, it means I'm gone. I never meant for anyone to carry this burden after me, but love doesn't disappear when the heart stops. It waits, like the light under the door of a locked room. His name was Daniel Wells. He came to me one summer, broken in ways I still can't write without shaking. His father drank. His mother had died. One evening I found him by the creek, bruised, crying, too scared to speak. I took him home. I meant to call the sheriff. I didn't. He slept for 2 days straight. When he woke up, he called me Grandma. I didn't correct him. From that day on, I was his and he was mine. I taught us to read by candlelight, to paint, to grow roses. He never asked to go outside after that first week. Maybe he was afraid the world would take him back. Maybe he just knew I couldn't let him go. When people asked why I didn't come to church anymore, I said my heart was tired. That was true. It was tired of losing. I know what I did was wrong by the law, but I will never believe it was wrong by love. Anna wiped her eyes, forcing herself to keep reading. The paper crackled in her trembling hands. On the night of the fire, he wanted to light a candle for his mother. I was inside preparing supper. I told him to wait for me. He didn't. I remember the smell of smoke, the scream that stopped too quickly, the way the air turned to fire when I opened the door. I pulled him out, but it was too late. The doctor said I should have called someone, but I couldn't even speak his name. They buried him under the apple tree. No one knew but me. I rebuilt the shed after. Everyone said I was foolish to waste my time, but I needed to keep his space alive. I needed to remember. I planted roses because he liked the smell. Every morning I said good morning to him. Every night I said good night. I prayed every day for forgiveness, not for hiding him, but for failing to save him. If you find this, please don't hate me. I did what I could in a world that turned its back on children like him. Tell whoever needs to know that he was loved. Tell them he was never forgotten. And if you can, plant new roses for him, red ones. He said they smelled like candy. Anna pressed the letter to her chest. For the first time in days, she cried, not from confusion or fear or even grief, but from a strange, overwhelming sense of peace. All the mystery, all the silence, all the years of wondering why her grandmother never let anyone inside, it had never been about shame. It had been about love, a fierce, desperate love that broke every rule and carried its punishment alone. She stayed there for a long time, reading the letter again and again until the dawn began to break. The cellar filled slowly with pale light, turning the dust in the air into something like gold. When she finally climbed back up, Michael was standing in the garden, staring at the apple tree. He didn't turn around when she spoke. "I found her last letter," Anna said softly. "She buried him there, under the tree." Michael's shoulders trembled, but he didn't move. "I always wondered why she planted roses around it," he whispered, "every year, without fail, even in winter." Anna handed him the letter. He read it in silence, his eyes filling with tears halfway through. When he reached the end, he folded it carefully, almost reverently. "She wasn't just my mother," he said, voice breaking. "She was his too." The wind passed gently through the garden, scattering petals from the roses across the damp grass. The shed stood behind them, open now, no longer a secret. Anna looked toward it, then at her father. "We should tell the truth," she said, "but not as a story of guilt, as a story of love." Michael nodded, his gaze lingering on the old tree. "Then we'll start here." They knelt together in the soil, digging with their hands, the smell of rain and earth rising around them. When they were done, Anna placed a small rose cutting beside the tree's roots. "For Danny," she whispered. The story should have ended there. 2 generations kneeling under an apple tree, whispering forgiveness into the soil. But secrets don't die easily. They echo. A week later, when Anna and Michael took the letter to the sheriff's office, they didn't expect anyone to believe it. They weren't looking for headlines or sympathy, just peace. But small towns don't handle revelations quietly. By the next morning, everyone in Maple Hollow knew. It started with a single conversation. Michael's old friend, Reverend Cole, who had been there when Evelyn died. He'd seen her in church, silent, kneeling, always the last to leave. When he heard the story, he said nothing for a long time. Then only this: "She sinned by law, but lived by mercy." The quote made its way into the local paper. Then came the reporters, the curious neighbors, the whispered judgments and uneasy admiration. "Can you imagine?" one woman said in the bakery. "Keeping a child hidden all those years?" Another replied softly, "Or imagine being that child, finally finding love, even if it was in a cellar." By evening, candles began appearing at the fence line. People left flowers, notes, small toys. Someone wrote on a card, "For Danny, you were never lost." Inside the house, Anna sat at the kitchen table with her father. The letter lay between them, unfolded now, edges soft from being read again and again. Michael's eyes were red, but his face was calm for the first time since the funeral. "They're gonna reopen the old case," he said quietly. "The sheriff wants to see where she buried him." Anna nodded slowly. She'd want that. The truth deserves to breathe, even if it hurts. He looked at her, something like pride flickering through the grief. "You sound like her." Anna smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point." And the next morning, police cars lined the property. They treated the ground beneath the apple tree with reverence. No shouting, no heavy machinery, just quiet work. When they unearthed the small box, everyone fell silent. It was weathered, simple, tied with a single strip of blue fabric. Inside were the remains of a small child and one item carefully preserved: a wooden bird, its paint flaking but its wings outstretched. Anna turned away, tears streaming silently. Michael whispered a prayer he barely remembered from childhood. When it was done, the sheriff came over, hat in hand. Mrs. Grant raised him, he said softly, maybe not by blood, but by heart. Then, after a pause, we'll see that he gets a proper headstone. That evening, the town gathered under the apple tree. No speeches, no music, just people standing quietly in the soft twilight. A woman from the church began humming a hymn. Someone else joined in. Anna and Michael stood at the center, hand in hand. She felt her grandmother's presence everywhere, in the petals falling from the roses, in the rustle of the leaves, in the warmth of the setting sun. When the song ended, Anna stepped forward. "I don't know what my grandmother expected of us," she said, her voice steady, "but I know she believed love mattered more than fear. She spent her life hiding that truth. I think it's time we live it." The crowd stayed silent. No one clapped. No one needed to. Later, as dusk deepened, Anna walked back to the shed one last time. The door still hung open, the scent of rain and wood inside. On the table lay one of Danny's drawings, the one she'd found first, the boy under the tree. She picked it up, smoothed the edges, and pinned it to the wall again. This time, she wrote something beneath it in pencil. Found 2025. She stepped back, letting the words settle among the hundreds of others. Safe, smile, roses, grandma. Outside, Michael waited, the glow of a lantern soft on his face. He looked older now, but lighter too, like a man who had finally set down a weight he didn't know he'd been carrying. "She would have liked this," he said. Anna nodded. She would have hated the attention, but she'd be glad he's not forgotten. They stood there for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. The roses trembled, their petals brushing against the shed's wooden walls like fingertips saying goodbye. When they went back inside the house, Anna stopped at the doorway and looked over her shoulder. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a flicker of movement, just a trick of the moonlight, a small shape by the tree, head tilted, watching. Then it was gone. But she didn't feel afraid. She smiled, whispering into the night, "It's okay, Danny. She's with you now." The next morning, the paper ran one final headline: "The Shed of Secrets, a story of silence, love, and redemption." And beneath it, a photograph, the shed door open, sunlight spilling inside, and roses blooming brighter than anyone remembered. A month later, the shed was no longer a secret. It was a sanctuary. The town had changed in quiet, almost reverent ways. The fences had been repaired, the roses replanted, and the apple tree, the one that had sheltered Evelyn's secret for half a century, stood taller, its blossoms returning earlier than anyone could remember. Michael spent most mornings out there, trimming, watering, sometimes just sitting with his coffee, talking to the air. Anna often found him smiling faintly, as if hearing a reply. One morning she joined him. The air was bright, warm, filled with the scent of grass and distant rain. The shed door stood open now, permanently. They had sanded the wood, replaced the lock with a simple latch, and restored the shelves just as Evelyn had left them. But now there were new things inside: framed photographs, copies of Danny's drawings, Evelyn's letter preserved behind glass. A small wooden sign hung above the doorway: "The place where love stayed." Visitors came quietly. Neighbors, old classmates, even people from out of town. They brought flowers, notes, little toys. Some came with their children. Some came alone just to stand in the stillness. Anna noticed how different it felt now. Not heavy, not haunted, alive. like the shed itself had been waiting all these years for someone to open it and let it breathe again. Inside, the sunlight hit the far wall where Danny's last drawing hung, the boy holding a candle, the faint outline of smoke behind him. But now, Anna had written something new beneath it, for Danny, the boy Grandma loved in secret. That afternoon, Michael and Anna held a small ceremony. No speeches, no cameras, no press. Just them, the Reverend, and a handful of townspeople who had known Evelyn all their lives. The Reverend said a few words about mercy, about how sometimes grace doesn't come in the form of light from heaven, but through the quiet courage of a single act of kindness that no one will ever see. Then he nodded to Anna. She stepped forward with a handful of rose petals. Her voice was soft but clear. She wasn't perfect, Anna said. She broke the law, she lied, she hid things, but she also saved a life, and when she couldn't save it anymore, she carried the memory of that child until her last breath. She looked up at the shed, eyes glistening. This place used to be her prison. Now it's his home again. She let the petals fall. They drifted down like whispers, settling on the dirt floor where Evelyn had once knelt to plant her roses. As the sun began to set, Michael walked over to the apple tree. He laid a new stone marker in the soil, simple, unpolished, but beautiful in its honesty. Daniel Wells, 1958, 1973, loved, found, remembered. He stepped back, his shoulders shaking slightly. Anna slipped her arm through his, resting her head against his shoulder. She'd be proud, she whispered. She'd say we made too much fuss, he murmured, a faint smile tugging at his lips. They both laughed softly, the first real laughter that had lived in that garden in decades. As dusk fell, the lanterns along the fence began to glow one by one, their light flickering gently in the breeze. Anna stood in the doorway of the shed, taking in the sight, the roses swaying, the apple tree standing guard, the open door breathing light into the dark. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she looked straight into the camera she'd set on the ground, recording everything for her small YouTube channel, the same one where she shared stories about people, about truth, about love that outlasted fear. Her voice was quiet but strong. If you're watching this, remember, sometimes the people who hide the most pain are the ones who've loved the deepest. If this story moved you, honor them. Plant something. Tell someone you forgive them. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be remembered. She smiled, closing her eyes for a moment, listening to the wind move through the garden. The camera kept rolling as she stepped back into the shed. She ran her hand along the smooth wood of the door, whispered something under her breath, a goodbye or maybe a thank you, and then, for the first time in 50 years, the shed's door stayed open through the night. By morning, the roses had climbed halfway up the frame, as if reaching for the light. The townsfolk swore the blossoms smelled sweeter that day, and when the wind passed through the garden, those who listened closely said they could hear two voices, a woman and a child, laughing softly somewhere in the distance. Not ghosts, just love finally unburied.